Welcome back to Member Musing. You're joining me, Brooke Hall, as I talk to Middle East and North Africa Leisure and Attractions Council members about the thriving MENA leisure landscape. This Menalac podcast brings you engaging dialogues regarding the MENA leisure and entertainment sector, as well as spotlighting the pioneering products, thrilling offerings, and amazing accomplishments of Menalac members. On today's episode, I have both company directors of newly founded global consultancy Thinking Adrenaline. A warm welcome to Damon Tudor and Craig Stoddart. It's great to have you both on the podcast, gentlemen.
Hi, Brooke. Good, great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here, Brooke. Thanks.
Now, Thinking Adrenaline is a relatively new company, from my understanding. However, the two of you are well versed within the leisure landscape and, in particular, the surf park space. So, I'd love for you to kick this episode off by telling me a bit about both your career experiences, how this partnership came about, because I know you're originally from two different sides of the globe, and what is the mission of Thinking Adrenaline?
Go
Okay.
on, buddy.
I was the original CEO of a business called The Wave in Bristol, and we were very early pioneers of the surf park space and launched the first Wave Garden Cove technology, which is sort of modern day surf technology, and took that through the whole investment process, construction, building the operational team, and ran the Wave for the first 3.5 years before we sold it in 2022. And building a surf park, it was one of the first parks in the world, and there was we were learning what to do as we went along. There wasn't really any references on other operating surf parks and how to do that. So there was only one person in the world that I could really turn to, and that was Damon, because he was in Australia, the other side of the world, doing the same. So we've been speaking on and off every month for the last couple of years and going through all the challenges and tribulations of building a surf park and then opening and then getting cut down by COVID and dealing with all the lockdowns and then opening up again and all of that sort of stuff. So we've been on a journey, very similar journey. We all sort of always said that we'd love to have the chance to try and work together. And when I finished up at the Wave in 2023, I got approached to help build a surf park in Bahrain. So building one over there at the moment. And again, that is taking it from concept through all the construction operations, and we're building the team there, and we'll leave them with a fully operating surf park and the first Wave Garden Cove in the Middle East, which is fantastic. That's been the journey. But let Damon tell you about his story and how we got together.
For me, Brooke, I mean, I lived in Dubai between 2008 and 2018, so I had 10 years of experience over here already, which was great. But we'd made the decision to move back to Australia. We wanted our kids to understand where home was, where they came from. That was a big part of the decision, and it was time for a bit of a change. And I got approached about urban surf by an old boss of mine, actually, who was the chair of the board and the major private equity investor, to come in at the end of 2018 to help out with the project, which had some challenges leading up to that point and needed a bit of support. So that's where I came into it. When I arrived, it was basically a big muddy hole in the ground. There wasn't much to show for it. There was a lot of work because the team were very keen to get this park opened as soon as possible. But again, as often with startups and complex construction and certainly new technology, there's a lot of work and things that can happen along the way. So pretty much that first year for me in 2019, we raised additional capital for the business. We set up every operational and commercial function. We finished the build, and then we launched in January 2019. So 1 year later, which was great. As Craig mentioned, we had the COVID situation as well. Australia had some unique ways of looking at the lockdown laws state by state, and Victoria was certainly one of those places that was a little bit more, shall we say, aggressive, with the approach. So we actually closed 6, 7 times after we just launched this park. So if you can imagine a $50 million investment, and then we had to continually reopen it and reinvigorate the customer. So a really challenging sort of phase. However, in that period of after opening Melbourne, we had to make a decision about whether we were going to progress on the Sydney project or not. And we did. We pushed for it, raised the capital, which was about $65 million at the time, and kicked on with the Sydney project, which was great. And that was significant. Of course, in 2022, we encountered things like the construction industry globally, basically imploding post-COVID with material increases, cost increases, with shortage of labor and all these sorts of challenges that we all faced. But we got through that as well, which is great. So it was only May last year that Urban Surf Sydney opened. So 2 surf parks under the belt. And I'd made the call that after 5.5 years in the job, it was probably time for something fresh, bringing some fresh blood into urban surf. And the family were actually quite keen to come back to the Middle East, where we'd lived for a long time. So I figured I'd spend a lot of time working on the startup that was Urban Surf, and building it from kind of 4 people to 250. And I kind of owed them one. So if they wanted to come back, all right, we'll work it out from there. And basically, I knew Craig had been working on Bahrain. We'd been in touch regularly. And when I kind of resurfaced after a bit of quiet time, out and we said, well, look, just makes sense that we could team up on this. We knew each other well. We knew each other's working styles, what we like to do, how we like to help businesses, and all this sort of history that we shared together. So, and we also shared some of the same dirt in the trenches, so to speak, of fighting the surf park wars, So that was an incredible learning. And for me, it was like, yeah, this is a really exciting opportunity. And, with a view of just really trying to drive an industry that's quite nascent and new, but really exciting, and that's where we are now.
I love the fact that the two of you have gone through, I can only imagine, lots of challenges, but of course some exciting and memorable times as well, individually, and then coming together and trying, I guess the idea of thinking adrenaline is supporting others so they don't make as many mistakes as or go through as many challenges, or they are anticipating the obstacles that the two of you perhaps couldn't at the time. So you've talked about, wanting to come back to the Middle East, but what is exciting you about, the region and what the two of you, your expertise, your knowledge can offer?
So it's absolutely clear that leisure, and particularly active leisure, is exploding in the Middle East. There's so many developments, so much focus in every country in the Middle East around creating new opportunities, new experiences, with real energy, and a lot of the developments, larger real estate developments, they need that hook and anchor which drives the footfall and creates the destination. And you've also got on top of that an incredible climate most of the year. So that sort of combination of things has made it incredibly exciting. It's very reachable from all over the globe. So it's it is where a lot of Europeans travel through, a lot of people from Asia, Australia, South Africa, all over Africa, Dubai, and the Middle East in general is a place where more and more of the global traveler is passing through. And so creating locations for them to come and spend time, come and visit, but also generating great places for the local populations and more things for them to do is just makes an incredibly exciting place to be based and launching this new business.
Surfing, I know, is on the rise, talking about active leisure. And surfing is not something that I've ever tried, and it definitely does look quite challenging. However, this increase in popularity demonstrates it's clearly a passion, or becoming a passion, for a lot of other people. And I think we've seen that in other parts of the world, whether that's people who are living near in a coastal region near the sea, or are able to get themselves to a surf park, but sort of what I understand is the two of you are very keen to drum up the excitement and the opportunity of people getting on a board. Oh, I was going to have a pun there. Getting on board. So getting literally on a surfboard and trying out for themselves. Damon, you recently wrote a vendor talk article for Menalac, and this was about the benefits of surf parks and what they offer not only guests but actually communities as well. And you mentioned in particular how surf parks are great inclusive environments. And so I would love for you to expand on this topic. As we all know, the MENA region and obviously the global leisure industry are focusing efforts on accessibility and inclusivity nowadays.
Yeah, no, that's a great experience. And I come from Australia where surfing is a pretty significant part of the culture. However, that doesn't mean that every Australian you meet is a surfer. And surfing itself can be a very aspirational. It can be quite an intimidating one for a number of reasons. It could be, just being in the ocean can be a bit of a scary experience. There's currents, sharks, stingers, you name it, it's all out there. And of course, then there's the surf culture. How do you navigate in an environment where there's other surfers, what the right thing to do is, what's the etiquette? All these sorts of things, again, can make it a bit of a barrier for people to try it for the first time. So that's a very real thing. And certainly with the surf park, we really are creating a couple of things. One is we use this term democratizing surfing, right? So everyone gets a fair go. If you compare someone like me compared to someone who's 20 years old and a good surfer, they'll probably beat me to the good wave every time that I'm trying to paddle for it, right? So it makes it very difficult to catch a wave sometimes. But in the surf park environment, we've created it so that everyone has their turn because you're in a controlled space. The other part of it too is that, and I used to say this to my team, is that we're not so much selling surfing, we're selling access to an awesome experience that just happens to be surfing. And that's where a lot of the technology for these adventure-related experiences are coming to now, which is fantastic, right? Because it's opening up doors to all sorts of different sports that no one may have tried before. Take places like Ski Dubai, for example, and the access to snow and being able to, shoot down the mountain. So for us, and I mean, we had a big focus in urban surf of certainly improving the demographic mix between guests. So if you looked at, over the summer months, probably 35% of our customers were female, a significant sort of difference to what the ocean would be if you were to go to any sort of normal break, say in Australia. The ability to access and teach children, people from different demographic groups about water awareness. So we used to have school programs where kids would be basically not so much thrown into the current, but life jackets on, experience the current. What do you do when a current takes you to a certain position in the ocean? How should you act? How do you remain calm? All of these things are really important for surf and water safety. So there were programs around that. There's the mental health aspect. There's numerous studies now that we call it blue health, that where surfing can assist in terms of mental illness, depression, this type of thing. So there's numerous charities we used to work with as well. And not only that, I think you're creating communities within communities. So I'll give you an example of that. In urban surf, we ran a 6-week program where you would basically start from never having surfed at all to progressing to probably an intermediate wave by the end of that experience. Now, you're in a group of people who've never done it before. You may well be putting on a wetsuit for the first time. It's an uncomfortable, awkward experience. How do I look in this wetsuit? What's it going to be like? Is the instructor going to think I'm a bit of a clown? No, they're not, because you want to gear your staff to really suit that customer. And you're going on this journey with other people who feel exactly the same way as you, but you're bonding through that aspirational experience that you've both achieved over that period of time. So you're creating these micro communities within the surf park, which then connect to the broader community of the surf park through competitions, videos, just meeting people socially. And that's the essence of surfing for where I come from, is that it's very much a community-driven sort of activity. And that's what we're trying to create here. This is not a transaction for us where we come from in surf parks. It's very much a relationship and experience with the customer who keeps coming back because it's such an addictive sport.
I think
For a community where there's relatively few surfers, what surf parks can do is they give an access to, as a complete novice, you can be surfing at a reasonable standard within months. And that's a completely transformational thing in surfing, because previously that sort of experience might take years before you get to that level. So it really transforms it. And in a geography where there is very, very little surfing, that sort of ability to change the learning curve makes a big difference.
You've talked about different demographics and people coming together, and I was thinking about myself and my move to Dubai, which is where I'm based, and there are a lot of expats here, locals, people from across the MENA region, from Europe, all over, and a big part of being an expat and coming moving to a new place is making friends. So I can imagine not only in Dubai and the UAE, but obviously we've got Saudi Arabia growing. We've got other areas of the region that are going to be pulling in expats from all over the world for various reasons, probably working in various industries. So I can see that the need for these types of attractions that build communities, and you can actually make friendships as well, whether you already had a bit of experience surfing, or it's something that actually as an adult you've said to yourself, do you know what, I'm getting a bit of a boring person, I need to get out there and I need to try something different, I need to challenge myself, which is what you've just said there, Craig, about like starting, and building and developing skills maybe you never thought you would. Do you foresee more specifically local guests engaging with surf parks in the same way that maybe as expats or tourists might? Is there anything you would say to encourage the sort of the more locals from across the region to try it out?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the great sort of routes for that is bringing schools in, and that really a lot of communities are built around families and around children, and so both in Urban Surf and the Wave, we had a lot of programs for schools where local schools would come in on a regular basis, and the kids would start surfing, become part of that club, that community that makes up the surf park. It's not just for the tourists and those traveling through, very much part of the local community. But it's also it's that healthy habit. And so what you find is that people find it's something that they come a little bit addicted to almost, because it's that physical health piece. It almost replaces your gym session on a weekly basis. But it also is incredibly powerful for the mental health, which Damon touched on. And that sense of complete immersion in something where your phone is put down and you're in the moment is very much what surfing is all about. And so, that sort of thing for local communities to become part of the habitual nature of what they do, where they choose to spend their time. So, we're in an attention economy, and can we capture healthy, exciting, interesting places where local communities can make the place they choose to spend their time when they have spare time? Surf parks are about. And that is whether you live locally or whether you're traveling through. So very much there's an opportunity to do that.
Well, we're talking about water when we're talking about surf parks. So, Damon, how sustainable is a surf park? There's a lot of water involved, but are these attractions meant to be developed in a way that considers the environment? And, is there benefits to actually a surf park rather than people going to the ocean to surf, for example?
Yeah, I mean, with Urban Surf, we had a big focus on using as much sustainable material as possible, things that weren't harmful to the environment. I think, to give an example, for the Sydney project, when we talk about sustainability, one aspect was the particular land we built on was a waste dump previously, or a tip, depending where you're from in the world. And it was used as a surface level car park. So the use of that land was very limited because of those issues. And we actually built Urban Surf Sydney on that piece of land. So from that perspective, it was a great repurposing of an otherwise pretty non-useful property, which was great. Definitely an impact. I think we're in a nascent stage of the industry where techniques and development aspects are moving all the time. We looked at, for example, in concrete mixes and bases and things like that, how we can use recyclable materials, or anything to do with planting. We want to make sure that we're those types of things around the landscaping is all done appropriately and all that sort of thing. So I think we'll see continual improvement in that space from a constructability perspective with surf parks. They're already improving all the time, and it's a really valid conversation. Not only do you have surfers that are very conscious of the environment, but the world has changed significantly. So, I think there's still a ways to go to get it to a stage where you say it's a sustainable proposition. However, there's things we're continually employing. Craig can touch on it, but the Wave employed a solar farm that powered the Wave completely, basically, as part of their angle that they took to achieve some of those outcomes. So again, in the Sydney project, we have a zero carbon target, those sorts of things. So that's really important. I think from a societal perspective, the sustainability, we talked about some of the mental health, the community aspects. So I think that's just such a critical part of it. That is important because that's going to make the project have that longevity and that financial return to continually put back into the community as well. All these aspects are really critical. And those sort of elements, I think what's important to, a relatively higher capex related project. So they've got to be run a certain way. You've got to manage the risks. You've got to plan it effectively. All these things will have an impact on the financial outcome, because that is an important part of what we do as well. But if you've got the customers engaged, you're building a sustainable proposition, a business that has, a good longevity to it, it will answer some of those financial outcomes you need.
Well, I'm already looking forward to watching this space and seeing the growth of water-based attractions and specifically surf parks. I'm sure the two of you are. Very quickly before we wrap up, what's your 2025 looking like for Thinking Adrenaline?
We've started off fairly rapidly. It's been a busy start. So we've got clients globally, some in the US, some in Europe, some in the MENA region, and some in Asia, which is fantastic. And I think to be able to share the scars on our back and stop people going through what we had to go through, where there was no one to turn to, and trying to de-risk these projects, get them up and running sustainably and successfully, is really what we're about. And it seems to be that the market's really keen to see that and have us involved with that. So we're really excited. We'll be the Bahrain project will be really moving this year for a 2026 opening. So that's an exciting part of this year as well. And hopefully by the end of this year, there'll be a number of others on their way as well.
On the horizon. And yeah, I think everyone likes to watch first to see what happens, and see, how attractions take off, specifically if it's something that the region, a country, or people are not used to. But the way that you two talk about it is so passionate. So I can, I'm assured they'll be embraced within the evolving market, bringing new elements of fun, inclusion that we've already talked about, and newfound passions as well. Damon, Craig, thank you so much for joining me, the two of you together. I know we've got quite a busy couple of weeks with doing lots of consulting and meetings and potential projects. So keep working hard, and hopefully we'll hear from you in 2025. And good luck for the coming year.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you, Brooke.
Now, to find out more about Thinking Adrenaline's consultancy services for the leisure and attractions industry, head to their website, where you can find which you can find in the description section of this episode. I also encourage you to check out Damon's Vendor Talk article on the Menalac website, along with a wealth of other fantastic reads in aid of making the MENA leisure and entertainment sector the best it can be. Finally, I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in to Member Musing and supporting the podcast, which is by the industry for the industry. Until next time, goodbye.